Good to be with you guys for our next daily devotion. We have just come out of chapter 11 of the Gospel of Matthew. And at the end of chapter 11, Jesus has that wonderful, beautiful line where he says, "My yoke is easy, my burden is light." And in the message on Sunday, we actually went into detail of what that really means, because I think a lot of times we're not understanding the context of who Jesus is saying that to and how the Pharisees were actually putting a huge yoke upon the people. We don't get to see the beauties of that. So I want to encourage you, if you ever get an opportunity, you got about 30 minutes extra to jump into one of our Sunday sermons and to get more context of what's going on. But for today, let's jump into our text, a couple minutes, and give a challenge for our daily devotion. Jesus now, beginning of chapter 12, shows himself to be Lord of the Sabbath. And what's happening here is Jesus is walking through on the Sabbath, which is a Saturday, and as he's walking through with his disciples through the grain fields, they're actually plucking the heads of grain and eating them right there. And the Pharisees catch on to this. Verse 2, it says, "But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, 'Look what your disciples are doing. It is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.'" Okay, so the Pharisees come to him, the religious leaders, and going, the fact that the disciples are eating this, they're breaking God's commandment. So Jesus, how can you be this great teacher of the Old Testament law, and yet you're allowing your disciples to break the law? The commandments that God has given us. And this is actually one of the hits that they had on Jesus. What is happening here, though, and you might be thinking, well, if Jesus is perfect and good and never broke any of God's laws, and why is he allowing this to happen? Well, the Old Testament actually does allow for poor people, when they're traveling or they're walking through grain fields, if they're in need, if they were hungry, they were allowed to, according to the law, to pluck the heads of grain and eat it. So there is actually no law violation here. So what's up with the Pharisees? Like, what are they doing? Well, in those 400 years of silence, if you remember some of our past conversations, the Pharisees added on rules, added on regulations, and then they were also the judge and jury to convict somebody if they broke the laws that they created, not God's laws. And so that's exactly what happened. The Pharisees created a law where people could not walk through fields or eat. It was considered work, and you had to honor the Sabbath, not God's law. So Jesus does something quite amazing, because here's what something the Pharisees would honor, and his disciples are doing something way less offensive. He says, "Have you not read what David did?" This is King David of the Old Testament, did when he was hungry, and those who were with him. He had a band of people. He was fleeing for his life. They couldn't eat. And how they entered into the house of God, the tabernacle, because they were so hungry, they went into the holy of holy places where the bread, the showbread, is there, and they ate that. The bread of presence, which was not lawful for him to eat and for those who were with him. Only the priests are to eat that. That is written down specific in the Old Testament law. David clearly violated this, so did those with him, and yet the Jewish people would honor that, because this is the great King David in his time of need. Jesus also says, "Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath, how the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath, and they are guiltless?" So inside the temple, the priests are given freedom to do some things inside the context of the temple. In the Old Testament, for many times, it was the tabernacle as well. And what was true of them, they're not breaking the law, even though they're doing all this work on the Sabbath, because there's worshiping for the Lord going on. And then he says, "I tell you," this is verse 6, "I tell you something greater than the temple is here." So Jesus automatically flips it to him. Here's once again another professing moment that Christ is showing that I am the Messiah. The whole purpose of the tabernacle, the temple, was to commune with God. And he's saying, I'm better than that. You can commune with me. And then let's close it out. "For the Son of Man," this is verse 8, "for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." So the Pharisees had it all wrong. They thought that these certain laws that they came to were honoring God. It was going against God's laws, and they're trying to pull something out and make Jesus guilty. But our main focus is what Jesus said at the very end. I am Lord, I am master of the Sabbath. What is the Sabbath? You ever thought about that? And why is there so much controversy over the Sabbath? Jesus heals on the Sabbath. There's controversy there. We have this moment. The Sabbath is going all the way back to the creation account, going all the way back to Moses talking about the creation account, is that when God created in 7 days, on the seventh day, he rested. And so God has built in, according to the Old Testament, that we as people are going to work hard, make a living, take care of our families, take care of what God has placed in our realm to take care of. And then we need to have a day of rest. And when we say a day of rest, it's not like you're going to just sit in bed and rest all day. No, the day of rest was a day set aside purely for the worship and the honor and the praise and the glory of the Lord. Now, we're not under that old covenant system anymore because now we are the temple of the living God as Christians. But there's a good principle here that we should all remember. How effective are we in giving ourselves time chunks, big time chunks, maybe even a full day, to be able to set aside time and to worship God with our families and with our spiritual family? And this comes to the place where we see the Lord's Day, Sunday, church, to be the day where many Christians say, that is my day of honor and praise and be with my family and worship of God, and we share a meal, and I have a day of rest in a sense. And I just want to encourage you, if you're watching this video and maybe you don't feel very connected and plugged into the church, I just want to encourage you or challenge you in this devotion. There is a good church out there. There is a God-honoring, biblically based, God-exalting church in your community. And I want to encourage you to step outside the comforts of home, maybe outside the comforts of watching messages on TV, to plug into a local church, because that's where your faith is going to come alive. And if you're plugged into a local church, praise God for that. And I want to encourage you to continue to serve the people of God and people of God's house and to encourage them in their journey as well. God bless you guys. Until next time.